The twin suns of the alien world Ragus Prime burned hot over the open market square. The air shimmered with heat, dust swirling in lazy spirals while the cries of merchants echoed across the bazaar. It was a place where goods from 100 star systems were traded, rare spices, crystals that glowed with inner fire, strange machines humming with alien energy. But at the far end of the square there was a darker trade taking place. There, behind metal bars and thick chains, living beings were bought and sold. Slavery was common under the Ragus dominion, a cruel empire that thrived on conquest. Defeated peoples were stripped of freedom and dignity, treated like objects, displayed for any who wished to purchase them. The scent of fear and despair hung heavy in that part of the market. Among those displayed was Lyra, a young woman from the once proud Kyrene people. Her species was known across the stars for their natural grace, their silver blue skin, and their gift for navigating the deep void between galaxies. Long ago, the Kyrene had been explorers, charting unknown space. But after their world fell to the Dominion, many were chained, sold, and scattered. Lyra had spent years in bondage. Her spirit had not broken, but each day chipped away at her pride. Her wrists were bound by heavy shackles, her ankles chained to the iron floor of her cage. Dust clung to her once smooth skin, her hair tangled, her clothes little more than rags. She sat in silence, her eyes fixed on the ground, but inside her mind she repeated one promise: I will not bow. I will not forget who I am. Her captors often mocked her. No one will buy you, sneered the market keeper, a reptilian alien with jagged teeth. Too proud, too silent. Buyers want obedience, not defiance. The others in the cages often wept or begged, but Lyra refused. She would not give them the satisfaction. Still, her heart ached. She remembered her family, her homeland, the great crystal towers of the Kyrene capital before they were reduced to ash. She remembered being dragged away, her people scattered like dust in the wind. In her darkest hours, she feared she would die in chains, forgotten by the stars her ancestors once explored. Then, one ordinary market day, something unusual happened. From the crowd of merchants, soldiers, and buyers, a figure stepped forward who looked unlike the others. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in simple dark clothes, not the rich silks of the Dominion, nor the armored uniforms of its officers. His skin was pale compared to the local races, his hair short and brown, his eyes steady and calm. He was human. Humans were rare in the Dominion's territories. Most great alien powers dismissed them as backward, a young species from a small blue world far from the galactic core. Few considered them important. Yet this man walked into the slave market without hesitation, as if he belonged there. The market keeper narrowed his eyes. What does a human want in my stalls? He hissed. The man's name was Captain Elias Ward. His voice was quiet but firm as he spoke. I came for her. He nodded toward Lyra's cage. The market keeper laughed, a harsh, rasping sound. Her? She's useless. Too proud. Too stubborn, no value. Why waste credits on her when I have others, obedient, trained, docile? But Elias did not move his gaze. His eyes locked on Lyra's, and for the first time in years she felt something strange. Someone looking at her as though she were not an object, but a person. His expression was unreadable, but there was no mockery, no hunger, no cruelty. Only a quiet weight, like a man who had seen much and judged carefully. How much? Elias asked. The market keeper blinked, then tried to play the game. For her? Too much for you, human. You cannot afford. Without another word, Elias reached into a pouch at his side and produced a stack of Dominion currency. He set it on the counter. The coins gleamed in the hot sun. Count it, he said simply. The reptilian's eyes widened. It was more than enough. More than he would have asked. Greed won over mockery. With a hiss, he signaled the guards. Unchain her. She's his problem now. The guards moved forward, unlocking Lyra's shackles with clanking keys. The heavy chains fell from her wrists and ankles, leaving her skin bruised but free. She stared in disbelief as the weight left her body. She had dreamed of this moment, but never believed it would come. As she stumbled forward, weak from long captivity, Elias extended a hand. She hesitated, her pride screaming at her not to accept help. Yet his hand did not command. It offered. Slowly she placed her trembling fingers into his palm, and he steadied her. The crowd murmured. Foolish human, someone sneered, wasting good money on trash. Another laughed. He'll regret it soon enough. But Elias ignored them. He guided Elira gently through the market, away from the jeering voices toward the edge where his starship awaited. For Elira, every step felt unreal. The dust beneath her bare feet, the light of the suns on her face, it all seemed brighter, sharper, as though the world itself had changed. She wanted to speak, to ask why he had done this, but the words caught in her throat. Finally, when they reached the shadow of the starship, she found her voice. Her tone was harsh, broken from years of silence, but her question was clear. Why? Elias glanced at her, his face calm. Because no one deserves chains, he said. Elira stared at him, trying to read his expression, searching for hidden cruelty, for some trick. But all she saw was honesty. For the first time in years, something flickered inside her chest. Not fear, not despair, but a fragile spark, hope. The Resolute rose slowly into the sky above Ragus Prime, its silver hull gleaming under the twin suns. For Elira, every vibration of the engines felt like a heartbeat. She had not stepped aboard a starship freely since her childhood. Now, as the ground fell away beneath her, she felt a rush of emotions she could barely understand. Fear, relief, wonder. Captain Elias Ward walked beside her, calm as ever, guiding her through the corridors. The ship was not large compared to Dominion cruisers, but to Elira it seemed like a palace. The walls were clean, the floors polished, the air filled with the low hum of power instead of the harsh stench of the slave markets. Elias showed her a small cabin. The room was plain, with a bed, a locker, and a window that looked out into the stars. But to Elira it was more than a room. It was freedom in solid form. She stood frozen, unable to move past the doorway. "This is yours," Elias said simply. "You're free to rest here. No chains, no orders." She turned to him, confusion in her eyes. "Yours? You mean I belong to you now?" Elias shook his head. "No. I bought your freedom, not you. You belong to yourself." The words struck her harder than any chain ever had. She almost laughed, but the sound came out as a choked sob. She covered her face with her hands, ashamed of her tears, yet Elias said nothing. He only nodded and left her to sit in silence. Days turned into weeks. At first, Elira did not trust the kindness. She expected Elias to reveal his true nature, to demand obedience, to show cruelty when she failed to please. But he never did. He greeted her each morning with a nod, asked if she was well, and treated her no differently than he did his crew. The crew itself was a small but diverse family. There was Kale, a towering insectoid engineer who clicked his mandibles when he was amused. Tessa, a sharp-tongued pilot from the outer colonies, often teased Elira, but never cruelly. And Darrow, a quiet medic with forearms who always made sure Elira ate enough. At first she kept her distance. She ate alone, spoke little, and flinched whenever someone came too close. But the others did not force her. Slowly, she began to respond. She answered questions, shared small stories, and once, when Kale's machines made a funny squeal, she laughed aloud. The sound surprised her. It had been years since she had laughed. One evening, Elias found her in the observation deck. She stood by the wide glass window, staring at the endless stretch of stars. They glittered like silver dust, each one a sun with its own worlds, its own mysteries. "You miss it, don't you?" Elias asked gently. She turned to him, startled. "Miss what?" "Freedom. The chance to choose your own path. To see the stars not as a prisoner, but as a traveler." Her voice was quiet. "Once, my people were navigators. We could feel the pull of gravity fields, the flow of cosmic winds. We guided ships through places machines could not map. It was our pride." She paused, her throat tight. "The Dominion took that from us." Elias studied her for a moment. "Maybe it's time you took it back." She blinked at him. "What do you mean?" "I've seen your eyes when you look at the stars. You still have the gift, don't you?" She hesitated. Deep inside, the instinct was still there, the quiet sense of direction, the whisper of distant currents in space. She had buried it for years, afraid to use it under her masters, But here, with no chains holding her, she could feel it stirring again. I think so, she admitted softly. Elias nodded. Then help us. Be our navigator. Not because you must, but because you want to. The first time she sat in the navigator's chair, her hands trembled. The console glowed before her, filled with symbols and star maps. The others watched quietly as she closed her eyes and reached out with her mind, letting her instincts guide her. She felt the gravity wells of nearby stars, the silent tug of black holes, the faint pressure of nebulae. It was like listening to music she had almost forgotten. She opened her eyes and entered coordinates. The ship shifted smoothly, moving through a corridor of space that sensors had marked as dangerous. But under her guidance, the Resolute glided forward without harm. When the course was complete, the crew erupted into cheers. Kyle clacked his mandibles. Tessa slapped her on the shoulder, and Darrow gave a respectful nod. For the first time in years, Elira smiled without hesitation. Yet freedom was not without shadows. At night, she still woke from dreams of the slave market, of whips and laughter, of being dragged through the dirt. Sometimes she sat alone in her cabin, shaking with the memory of voices telling her she was worthless. Elias noticed. One evening, when she sat curled up by her window, he came and sat across from her. He did not speak at first. He only waited until she lifted her eyes to him. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," he said softly. Her voice cracked. "But I am. The chains are gone, but I still feel them. What if I never escape them?" Elias leaned forward. "Chains can break the body, but the spirit, that is yours. No one can take it unless you give it away." She stared at him, tears shining in her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Slowly, she began to believe him. As the weeks passed, Elira grew stronger. She walked with her head higher, her voice firmer. She helped Tessa chart routes, worked with Kale on navigation systems, and even shared laughter with Darrow over meals. The crew no longer saw her as a rescued slave, they saw her as one of them. And inside, Elira began to feel something she thought she had lost forever, the belief that her life could be more than survival. But whispers followed them across space. News traveled quickly in the Dominion. Some mocked Elias for wasting money on a slave. Others called him a fool for trusting one of the conquered Carini. Yet a few wondered if perhaps the human's actions meant something more. Elira did not yet know it, but her journey had only begun. For now she was free. For now she was part of something greater than herself. And for the first time in years she looked to the stars not with despair, but with hope. The Resolute drifted through the black sea of space, its engines humming softly as it traveled between the stars. Life on the ship had become steady, almost peaceful. Elira had grown into her new role as navigator, guiding the vessel through dangerous regions that machines alone could not handle. Each time she charted a course, each time the crew trusted her judgment, her confidence grew. Yet outside the ship, the galaxy was not silent. The Dominion had heard whispers of a human who bought a Carini slave only to free her. To the rulers of the Empire, this was more than foolish, it was dangerous. If one slave could be freed and treated as equal, then others might dream of the same. Dreams, after all, were harder to chain than bodies. Elias knew trouble would come. He did not hide this from Elira. One evening, as they studied star maps together, he spoke quietly. "The Dominion doesn't forget. They will come looking for you, Elira." Her hand froze over the console. "For me? Yes, they don't see you as a person. To them, you're property, and they don't like losing property." Her heart tightened. For a moment, the memory of chains returned, heavy and suffocating. But then she looked at Elias, calm and steady as always, and she drew in a slow breath. "Then they will find I am not theirs anymore." The test came sooner than expected. A patrol fleet of the Dominion intercepted the Resolute near the edges of a trade corridor. Their warships dwarfed Elias's vessel, weapons glowing in the dark. A transmission came through the comms, the cold voice of a Dominion commander filling the bridge. "Human captain, you have something that belongs to us. Hand over the Carini slave at once and we will allow you to leave alive." Silence filled the bridge. The crew looked at Elias, waiting for his answer. Slowly he stood, his presence steady. "She is not a slave," he said firmly. "She is crew. She is free." The Dominion commander laughed cruelly. Do not play games, human. You cannot protect her, surrender her, or be destroyed. Elira's blood ran cold. Fear clawed at her chest, whispering that she was still weak, still chained. But then she looked at Elias, who had spoken those words without hesitation, without fear. She felt the eyes of the crew on her, too, not with pity, but with trust. Something inside her shifted. She was no longer the broken girl of the market. She was a navigator. She was part of the Resolute, and she would not let them take her back. Captain, she said firmly, let me guide us. Elias met her eyes. For a long moment he studied her as if measuring her resolve. Then he nodded. All right, Elira, show us the way. The Resolute leapt into motion. Dominion ships moved to block every path, their weapons charging. The crew's hands raced over consoles, but it was Elira who closed her eyes. Reaching deep into her instincts, she felt the currents of space itself, the pull of stars, the hidden corridors between gravity fields, the invisible rivers of energy that only the Carini could sense. There, she whispered, there's a way. She fed the coordinates into the system and the ship veered sharply, skimming the edge of a pulsar's deadly field. Dominion ships hesitated, unwilling to risk the same path. The Resolute dove through, the hull shaking, lights flickering, but Elira held steady. Adjust 3 degrees, she called out. Now faster. Trust me. The crew obeyed, their faith placed entirely in her. The ship slid between 2 massive asteroids, then dipped into the shadow of a nebula. The Dominion warships tried to follow, but their computers could not predict the path. The hunters were left behind, snarling across the comms as the Resolute vanished into the safety of the stars. When the danger passed, the bridge erupted in cheers. Kale clacked his mandibles in triumph. Tessa slapped the console and Darrow exhaled in relief. Elias turned to Elira, his eyes warm with pride. Well done, he said simply. Elira's chest swelled. For the first time in years, she did not feel like a prisoner hiding from the past. She felt strong, capable, alive. She had guided them to freedom, but the battle was not just one of ships and stars. News of the escape spread. Across the galaxy, whispers grew louder. Some mocked the human and his foolish kindness, but others, slaves, servants, the oppressed, heard something else. They heard of a Carini woman who had stood against the Dominion and won. In secret corners of the galaxy, her story became a spark. Elira was no longer invisible. She was a symbol. She struggled to accept this at first. One night, sitting alone in her cabin, she whispered to Elias, I was just one person in chains. Why should anyone care about me? Elias smiled faintly. Because you remind them that chains can be broken. That matters more than you know. His words stayed with her. Weeks later, as the Resolute traveled once more through the endless dark, Elira stood at the observation deck, staring at the stars. She remembered the day she had sat in the slave market, filthy and hopeless, believing no one would ever see her as more than dirt. She remembered the human who had reached out a hand, not to command, but to offer freedom. Now she was free. Not only free, but part of a crew, a family. And her spirit, once crushed, now burned brighter than the suns outside. The galaxy had dismissed humans as unimportant, a young species without power. But Elias had shown something greater than power. Compassion, defiance, the belief that dignity mattered more than fear. And because of that, Elira had risen. The galaxy would remember her not as a slave, but as a navigator, a leader, and a voice of hope. And it would remember that a single human, standing against cruelty, had changed the course of countless lives. From that day, Elira walked the ship with her head high. Not chained, not broken, but free. And in the endless dark of the universe, the legend of the human